So let's add another point to this. As I already mentioned, all those negotiations over 25 years or so have I cannot see my cursor here for whatever reason. Have not resulted in a reduction of emissions. So you can see COVID made a little dip and then we are right back. 2008 financial crisis made a little dip and we went right back, and so on. So carbon trap is a real thing. What can individuals do? I already explained why climate is a wicked problem that doesn't necessarily have a solution. It's not like you said, okay, we've done everything we can and the climate problem is solved. We have to keep on resolving it again and again. And I would just say do whatever you can. We'll go through a few things. So if it is walking, riding your bicycle, taking public transportation, not owning a big house, using your clothes as long as they should last, and so on and so forth, can all help, of course. But also it is known from research that willpower is a limited resource, especially for poor people. They wake up and they have to make multiple choices with the limited financial resources they have, and they may start with all the good intentions, but by midday they may just be exhausted by the choices they have to make. Rich people, on the other hand, have the luxury of choosing when to drive, when to ride a bicycle, buy a fancy bicycle and say, haha, I bought a bicycle and it has, you know, all kinds of features and so on. But there is no silver bullet, because people, we will see, can be driving a hybrid car, but eat so much meat that their carbon footprint can be larger than a person who is a vegetarian and driving an SUV. Or you could be riding a bicycle but eating so many hamburgers that your carbon footprint may be larger than somebody who is a vegetarian who's driving a car, a hybrid car, let's say. Okay, so I don't think there is any point to feeling guilty, because the system does have some limitations on what you can do, but there are some so-called no regret decisions which are absolutely must-dos for most of us. So let's start by thinking about some of them. I've just randomly chosen a few. Does it help if you have fewer children? Population is often touted as a major cause of climate change, but it is tricky, because if you look at nations with per capita emissions, wealthy nations lead per capita emissions. Countries with the highest per capita emissions in tons of CO2 per year: Saudi Arabia, US, Canada, Australia, South Korea, and then China is way down here, is India is half of that or less. Of course, even if you include the population differences of China and US, you are still going to come out more in the US than in China, almost. But that doesn't mean you should continue to have more children. Not having children does produce unique problems. China had the one-child policy. Now they have a problem of elders not being able to be taken care of, so they are encouraging people to have more children. They have removed the one-child policy. India reported that it is headed towards below replacement population and so on. So those are issues to deal with. Plus, as I said before already, people who are having fewer children are not necessarily having a lower emission. In a country like China, people with more children working in farms, for example, will have a much lower carbon footprint than 6.4. 6.4 is the average when you take the very rich people living with this kind of carbon footprint and very poor people which are living with less than 10% of that. So same in India. So just because you have fewer children doesn't mean you are necessarily helping the planet. Of course, population puts pressures on habitats for animals, wildlife conflicts, resources and so on, but just purely from consumption and emissions, we cannot say population is a big factor, or that reducing population will solve the climate change problem, unless we reduce emissions and consumption. Okay, the other tricky part is to think about what seem apparent and intuitive when a shopkeeper asks you plastic or paper or cloth. You think, duh, obviously paper or cloth and not plastic, because plastic is a menace. Well, plastic is a miracle substance. It has really made tremendous difference in human lives. But again, there is no silver bullet, because if you do a life cycle analysis as was done by this Danish institute, general structure for all carrier bag scenarios assessed in this life cycle analysis study. End of life refers to three different end of life operations. EOL1 is incineration, EOL2 is recycling, and EOL3 is reuse as waste bin bag. So there is the production of carrier bag material, the production of packaging material, manufacture of the carrier bag itself, treatment residues. As I said before, the so-called biodegradable plastic can be non-biodegradable because of the chemicals they are coated with. So coated with, not coded. Coated with, so you have to be careful. They are transported to the use spot, then they are either collected, transported, and end of use life packaging happens, or they're collected and end of life carrier bag recycling happens with these three options of incineration, recycling, and reuse. What is the issue? When you consider carrier bags providing the lowest environmental impacts for all the environmental indicators, then the order in which the bags are listed corresponds to the ranking of their life cycle analysis results, starting from the lowest impact. Only the three lowest scoring bags are listed. The results refer to the reference flow provided in table 1, which you can look up. So depending on which environmental indicator you look at, the carrier bags providing the lowest impacts are not very obvious. Okay, climate change, paper unbleached, biopolymer, and light density polyethylene. Ozone depletion, LDPE is better. Human toxicity, cancer effects, paper unbleached and LDPE is better. Human toxicity, non-cancer effects, composites, PP and LDPE are better. So photochemical ozone formation, ionizing radiation, particulate matter, terrestrial acidification, terrestrial eutrophication, freshwater eutrophication, marine eutrophication, ecosystem toxicity, resource depletion and fossil fuel depletion, resource depletion, abiotic, water resource depletion. So my point is that you just cannot make all the choices without knowing all these sorts of details. So that again is a question of how much energy you have to actually sit down and make all these decisions. Okay, so let's leave that there, in the sense that use cloth, reuse it, use plastic but reuse it, don't trash it anywhere and everywhere. Use paper bag, but then do something with the paper bag. So you cannot know the end-to-end life cycle of what is being used, but using paper bag and then using cloth, for example, and washing it can also create problems of water use, water pollution, and so on. So it's an unending cycle of things to worry about. So do the best you can, do the best decision you can take, and be environmentally conscious, and don't bang your head against the wall about whether you are doing enough or not. So we will add more points along the way.